Well, joining me now with more on the reaction to the not guilty verdict in this controversial case is Charles Rose, law professor at Stetson University in Tampa, Florida. Professor, thanks for joining us.
Glad to do it.
When we look at coverage of this case, and of course it's been covered wall to wall on American television over the past few weeks, there's always been a heavy racial undercurrent in the trial all the time. Was this perhaps inevitable when we look at the fact that the accused, George Zimmerman, was being referred to as white all the time, although he's Hispanic, and the victim was a black teenager?
Well, it was guaranteed to happen given the way in which the case actually made it into the judicial system. It came about because of an outpouring of interest on the part of citizens, so race in the mind of the American public was the key issue for this trial. Unfortunately, that was not the issue within the walls of the courtroom.
To what extent did the media frame this as a sort of racial courtroom battle? I mean, it appeared to have served their purpose in that regard because people watched this trial all the time.
They sold an awful lot of potato chips by talking about it that way. But what we found out as the trial went on, if you actually watched the trial and not the commentators talking about the trial, was that it was a classic case of a situation gone bad where self-defense was potentially available. That doesn't fit the story that most people expected, and it's a large part of the reason why they're so upset now.
Right, and what do you make of the response around the country? I mean, since the verdict was announced last night, late Saturday night here in the United States, there's been a great deal of anger.
There's been a lot of anger, but there hasn't been a lot of violence. And what that tells me is that as a country, we're sensitive to these issues, and we are thinking about them deeply, which is what we should be doing. Now, what happens next will probably be crucial from a legal perspective as to how it's perceived within the public eye.
Now, you mentioned what happens next, and is this case now over as far as legal authorities in Florida are concerned, or there's now talk of getting the Department of Justice, that's the federal body, the Department of Justice, involved in this and taking some kind of civil action against George Zimmerman?
Well, there was talk about the Department of Justice before the state of Florida stepped in and made this a Florida case, and that discussion has continued. But you have to remember, that's normally done when it's an actor of the state who was involved in the civil rights violation. Think of Rodney King, for example, where you had the police officers involved. Here we have a private citizen who's part of a volunteer organization trying to police his own community. It's going to be very hard to get a federal judge to buy into the idea that this should apply, that they should apply the federal law. They can try, but they would be taking a step further than they've gone before.
And what do you make of the fact that the president himself has got involved in this? He made a statement some time ago about Trayvon Martin, and in the wake of this verdict, he's also made a statement, which we covered earlier on in our newscast, calling for calm, calling for reflection, and asking people to respect the rule of law.
He's doing exactly what you would expect not only a president, but perhaps a former law professor to do, to try to bring folks back to the center thing from an American perspective, which is this fidelity to the rule of law. It's sort of the thing that binds a nation of immigrants together. At the same time, he's making a plea about gun violence and about self-defense laws, which is really the issue that has gotten lost in all of this coverage.
Okay, sir, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us.